The notification sound was so ordinary, just a soft ping from my phone sitting on the kitchen counter. But that single message would unravel everything I'd carefully constructed, exposing not just my secret weekend, but the person I'd become. As I watched my husband David's face change from confusion to understanding, I realized that some lies are too big to contain, and some betrayals leave receipts that can't be deleted. I'd been planning the weekend for 3 weeks, crafting each detail like I was orchestrating a military operation. The story I told David was simple and believable: a mandatory training conference for logistics managers in Portland, 2 days of seminars about supply chain optimization. Boring enough that he wouldn't ask questions, important enough that he wouldn't suggest coming along. "You sure you need to go to this thing?" David asked, looking up from his laptop where he was reviewing quarterly reports for his accounting firm. His brown hair was getting longer, touching his collar in a way that used to make me want to run my fingers through it. Now, it just reminded me of how predictable everything had become. "It's not optional," I said, adding just the right amount of irritation to my voice. "Regional managers from 3 states will be there. If I skip it, Henderson will notice, and you know how he feels about people who aren't committed to professional development." David nodded, returning to his screen. That was the thing about my husband. He trusted me completely. After 8 years of marriage, he'd never had a reason not to. I was Irene, the responsible one, the wife who remembered anniversaries and kept detailed calendars and never missed a parent-teacher conference for our 10-year-old son Jonas. Except now I was also Irene, who had been texting her ex-boyfriend Adrian for 6 months, ever since he'd reached out on LinkedIn with a casual, "Saw your promotion announcement, congratulations." 6 months of messages that started professional and slowly became personal. 6 months of remembering who I used to be before mortgages and school pickup schedules and the same conversations about weekend grocery runs. "When do you leave?" David asked. "Friday morning. I'll be back Sunday evening." I'd already booked the train tickets to Seattle, where Adrian lived now. He'd moved there 2 years ago to start his creative agency, posting photos on social media of coffee shops and mountain views, and the kind of spontaneous life I'd given up when I chose stability over adventure. The conference story wasn't even completely fabricated. There was a real logistics conference happening in Portland that weekend. I'd found it online, memorized the schedule, even printed out a fake registration confirmation. If David asked to see it, I was ready. But he didn't ask. He just kissed my forehead and said, "Drive safe," the way he always did. I spent Thursday evening packing carefully. Professional clothes for the fictional conference, but also the black dress Adrian had always loved, the one that made my green eyes look brighter and reminded me of the woman I'd been at 25. I packed the perfume I'd worn in college, the one that smelled like jasmine and possibility. Jonas was staying with David's parents for the weekend, something we'd arranged weeks earlier under the guise of giving David and me some alone time. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I pushed the guilt aside. This wasn't about hurting anyone. This was about remembering who I was before I became just a wife and mother and middle manager who spent her days tracking shipping containers and her evenings helping with homework. Friday morning arrived grey and drizzly, typical for November in our part of Washington. I loaded my overnight bag into my Honda Civic, the same car I'd been driving for 4 years because it was practical and reliable, and everything I'd become. "Text me when you get there," David said, standing in the doorway in his pajamas and robe. He looked younger like this, less formal than in his work clothes. For a moment, I almost changed my mind. "I will," I promised, and that part, at least, was true. I would text him when I arrived, just not where he thought I was going. The drive to Seattle took 3 hours. I'd told David I was flying to Portland, but I couldn't risk the paper trail of airline tickets. Instead, I drove north, my heart racing with anticipation and terror in equal measure. I kept the radio off, needing the silence to convince myself this wasn't betrayal, just exploration. Just one weekend to remember what it felt like to be desired instead of needed. Adrian was waiting at his loft in Capitol Hill, the trendy neighborhood that was everything our suburban subdivision wasn't. He looked exactly like his recent photos, still lean and athletic, still wearing the kind of effortlessly stylish clothes that suggested creativity and freedom. His dark hair had some grey now, but it only made him more distinguished. "Irene," he said, and the way he said my name, like it was something precious he'd been saving, made me remember why I'd fallen for him in the first place. His apartment was everything I'd expected: exposed brick walls, hardwood floors, artwork from local artists, covering every surface. It was the opposite of my house with its beige walls and family photos and carefully coordinated furniture from chain stores. "This is beautiful," I said, meaning it. "Not as beautiful as you," he replied, and I knew it was a line, but I didn't care. When was the last time David had called me beautiful? When was the last time anyone had looked at me like I was something worth pursuing instead of something already possessed? We spent Friday afternoon walking through Pike Place Market, acting like tourists, like we had no obligations waiting for us anywhere else. Adrian bought me flowers. Actual flowers, not the grocery store bouquets David picked up when he remembered special occasions. We ate dinner at a restaurant with mismatched chairs and a menu written on a chalkboard, the kind of place I would have loved 15 years ago, but had stopped suggesting because David preferred chains with consistent quality and reasonable prices. That night, in Adrian's bed with the city light streaming through tall windows, I felt like myself again. Not the careful, responsible version of myself I'd become, but the impulsive, passionate woman who used to stay up until dawn talking about dreams and possibilities. "I missed you," Adrian whispered against my neck, and I let myself believe it was true. Saturday was perfect in the way stolen time always is. We drove to the mountains, hiked a trail that ended at a waterfall, took selfies with the autumn leaves and the dramatic sky. I posted some of the landscape shots on Instagram, carefully cropped to remove any evidence of Adrian's presence, with captions about work trips and finding balance. I texted David periodically, "Conference is boring but useful. Hotel is nice. Miss you too." Each lie came easier than the last. Saturday night we went to a jazz club, the kind of place David would have found too loud and too crowded. Adrian knew the musicians, introduced me as his friend from out of town, and I didn't correct him. We danced to music that was all saxophone and possibility, and I felt young again, desired again, alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Sunday morning came too soon. I had to be back by evening, had to return to my real life with its responsibilities and routines. Adrian made coffee in a French press, the kind of small luxury that seemed impossibly sophisticated compared to our automatic drip machine at home. "When can I see you again?" he asked, and the question hung between us like a promise and a threat. "I don't know," I said, but I was already thinking about how to make it happen. The drive home felt like traveling between worlds. With each mile south, I felt myself transforming back into the woman David expected me to be. I stopped at a rest area to change clothes, trading the flowing skirt and fitted top for the conservative blouse and slacks that belonged to my conference story. I practiced my lies in the car. The sessions were informative. I learned a lot about supply chain analytics. The other attendees were mostly men, kind of boring. I had enough real conference details memorized to answer any questions David might ask. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I almost believed the story myself. The house looked smaller than I remembered, more ordinary. David's sedan was parked in its usual spot, and I could see the blue glow of the television through the living room window. "How was it?" David asked when I walked in, looking up from the football game he was watching. "Educational," I said, setting down my bag. "Glad to be home, though." He smiled and patted the couch beside him. Come tell me about it. I curled up next to him, letting his familiar warmth surround me, and told him carefully constructed half-truths about keynote speakers and networking sessions. He listened with the patient attention he always gave my work stories, asking thoughtful questions that made me feel guilty and grateful in equal measure. "I'm proud of you," he said when I finished. "I know these things aren't always fun, but you're building your career." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. Here was my husband, supportive and trusting, proud of what he thought was my professional dedication, and I'd spent the weekend in another man's bed. But underneath the guilt was something else, a thrilling sense of having gotten away with something. I'd pulled it off. I'd had my perfect weekend, and David suspected nothing. That's when my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at the screen casually, expecting maybe a message from my mother or a work email. Instead, I saw Adrian's name and a message that made my blood freeze. "Miss you already, beautiful. Next time, let's not hide from the world. I want to show you off properly." The phone was lying on the coffee table between David and me. The message was right there on the lock screen, clearly visible. I watched David's eyes move from the television to the phone, watched his expression change as he read the words. For a moment, we both stared at the message in absolute silence. Then David looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but a kind of cold understanding that was somehow worse than either. "Who's Adrian?" he asked quietly. And just like that, my perfect lie crumbled into pieces. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear the football announcers chattering about down and distance, could hear the neighbor's dog barking, could hear my own heart hammering against my ribs. David's question hung in the air, waiting for an answer I didn't know how to give. "It's not what you think," I said finally, the words sounding hollow even to me. David picked up my phone, looking at the message again. His face was completely calm, which somehow made everything worse. I'd expected shouting, accusations, demands for explanations. This quiet consideration was terrifying. "So there was no conference," he said. It wasn't a question. "David, please, let me explain. Was there a conference, Irene?" His voice was still level, but I could hear something underneath it, something that made me want to run. "No," I whispered. He nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. "Where were you?" This was the moment. I could still minimize it, could still control the narrative. "I went to see an old friend, that's all. Nothing happened, David. I just needed some space to think." "An old friend who calls you beautiful and talks about not hiding." David's fingers were white where they gripped my phone. "An old friend who wants to show you off properly." "You're taking it out of context. Adrian is dramatic. He always talks like that. We just had coffee and caught up on old times." Even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded, but I couldn't stop myself from digging deeper into the lie. It was like falling. Once you started, momentum carried you down. David stood up, my phone still in his hand. "Show me the pictures from this weekend." My mouth went dry. "What?" "You always take pictures when you travel. Show me the photos from your weekend with Adrian." I'd been so careful about the photos, cropping out anything that could incriminate me. But there were still the landscape shots, the ones I'd posted with captions about work travel. If David looked closely at the metadata, if he compared them to where I was supposed to be, I didn't take many pictures, it was mostly just talking. "Show me your Instagram posts from this weekend." He was already pulling out his own phone, navigating to my account. I watched him scroll through the photos I'd posted, the mountain vista, the waterfall, the autumn leaves. His face grew more grim with each image. "These are from the Cascades," he said, "not Portland." I felt the walls closing in. David knew the Pacific Northwest better than I did. He'd grown up here, had hiked most of these trails. Of course he'd recognize the location. "I drove up there on Saturday," I said desperately. "After the conference sessions ended, I had some free time." "The conference that didn't exist." "David, please, Stop! The word came out sharp enough to cut. Just stop lying to me. He was scrolling through my phone now, looking at my text history with Adrian. I'd deleted most of the messages, but not all of them. Not the recent ones where we'd planned the weekend, where Adrian had called me gorgeous and irresistible, and all the things David hadn't called me in years. 6 months, David said, reading. You've been talking to him for 6 months. It was just texting, just friendly conversation. Can't wait to hold you again. That's friendly conversation. I wanted to disappear, to rewind the last hour and grab my phone before that message could appear. But there was no going back now. David was reading everything, seeing the slow progression from professional reconnection to emotional affair to whatever this weekend had been. Did you sleep with him? David asked without looking up from the phone. The question hit me like a slap. I could lie, but what was the point now? He'd already seen enough to know the truth. David, did you sleep with him, Irene? Yes. The word came out as barely a whisper. David set the phone down on the coffee table very carefully, like it was made of glass. Then he walked to the window and stared out at our front yard, at the life we'd built together. 8 years, he said to the window. 8 years of marriage, and you throw it away for a weekend with your ex-boyfriend. I didn't throw anything away. This doesn't have to change anything between us. He turned to look at me then, and the expression on his face made me step backward. Doesn't have to change anything. You lied to me for months. You created an elaborate fake story to cover up cheating on me. You came home and sat on this couch and told me more lies. And you think nothing has to change? It was a mistake, I said, tears starting to flow. A stupid, selfish mistake. But it's over now. I'll never see him again. How do I know that? How do I know anything you say is true? The question hung between us, and I realized I didn't have an answer. How could I prove I was telling the truth now when I'd been lying for so long? Because I love you, I said. Because I want to save our marriage. You should have thought about that before you fucked your ex-boyfriend. The crude language was so unlike David that it shocked me into silence. In 8 years of marriage, I'd never heard him talk like that. I'm going to stay at my parents' house tonight, he said. I need time to think. David, please don't leave. We can work through this. But he was already moving, grabbing his keys and wallet from the hall table. Don't call me. Don't text me. I'll contact you when I'm ready to talk. What about Jonas? He's supposed to come home tomorrow. I'll pick him up from my parents' house. He can stay there a few more days. You can't keep my son away from me. David stopped at the door. Our son. And I'm not keeping him away. I'm protecting him from having to see his parents fight while I figure out if we still have a marriage. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow felt more final than if he'd slammed it. I stood in the living room for a long time after he left, staring at my phone on the coffee table. Adrian had sent 2 more messages. Hope you got home safe and already planning our next adventure. The casual presumption that there would be a next time made me feel sick. I picked up the phone and typed back, "Can't do this anymore. Please don't contact me again." His response came immediately. What happened? Did he find out? I turned off the phone without answering. The house felt enormous and empty without David and Jonas. I wandered from room to room, seeing everything differently now. The wedding photos on the mantel, the family vacation pictures lining the hallway, the drawing Jonas had made of our family that we'd hung on the refrigerator. Everything looked like evidence of a life I'd just destroyed. I called my mother, needing to talk to someone who would understand. Irene, it's late, honey. Is everything okay? Mom, I made a terrible mistake. The words came out in a rush, along with tears I couldn't control. What kind of mistake? Are you hurt? I cheated on David. He found out. He left. There was silence on the other end of the line. My mother, Helen, had always been my defender, the one who took my side in every conflict. But this was different. Oh, Irene, she said finally. What were you thinking? I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I I just felt so trapped, so invisible. Adrian made me feel alive again. Adrian? Your college boyfriend? We reconnected online. It started innocent, just catching up, but then you decided to blow up your marriage. The harsh judgment in my mother's voice surprised me. I'd expected sympathy, understanding, maybe even support. I thought you'd be on my side, I said. I am on your side. That's why I'm telling you the truth. You have a good husband, a beautiful son, a stable life. And you risked all of it for what? A weekend of feeling young again. It wasn't just about feeling young. David and I have been drifting apart for years. We're like roommates, not lovers. So you talk to him about it. You go to counseling. You don't sneak around behind his back and lie about work conferences. I knew she was right, but hearing it made me defensive. You don't understand what it's like. You and Dad have been happy for 35 years. You don't know what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage. Your father and I have been happy because we work at it every day, because we choose each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. After I hung up, I sat on the couch where David and I had been sitting just hours earlier, back when he still trusted me, back when our marriage was still intact. The football game was still on, the score unchanged since David had walked out. I thought about calling Adrian back, telling him what had happened, maybe even driving back to Seattle to lose myself in his arms again. But that would only make everything worse. That would turn a mistake into a choice, a moment of weakness into a pattern of betrayal. Instead, I turned off the TV and went to bed in the guest room. Our bedroom felt too intimate, too full of memories, of the life I might have just destroyed. I lay awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling and wondering if David would ever forgive me, if we could somehow rebuild what I'd torn down with one weekend of selfishness. But even as I planned what I'd say to win him back, part of me was still thinking about Adrian, still remembering how it felt to be desired instead of just needed. And that, I was beginning to realize, might be the real problem. David didn't come home the next day, or the day after that. He texted me once to say he'd picked up Jonas from his parents and that our son was staying with him for now. When I called to talk to Jonas, David answered and handed the phone over without speaking to me. "Hi, Mom," Jonas said, his 10-year-old voice careful and confused. "Dad says you guys are having some grown-up problems." "Just a little disagreement, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." "Are you getting divorced?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "No, baby. We're just working through some things. I'll see you soon, okay?" But I wasn't sure that was true. David had been gone 3 days, and the silence from him was deafening. He wasn't answering my calls, wasn't responding to my texts. It was like he'd decided I no longer existed. On Wednesday, I went back to work, hoping that routine would help me feel normal again. But as soon as I walked into the office, I could tell something was wrong. Conversation stopped when I approached. People who usually said good morning just nodded and looked away. My assistant, Rebecca, was the one who finally told me what was happening. "Irene, I don't know if you've seen social media today, but..." She showed me her phone. There, on Facebook, was a post from David's sister, Claire. "Some people have no respect for family or commitment. Praying for my brother during this difficult time." The post had dozens of comments, most from people I knew. Our neighbors, friends from Jonas's school, people from David's work. The comments were vague enough to maintain plausible deniability, but specific enough that anyone who knew us would understand what was happening. "I'm so sorry," Rebecca said. "I thought you should know before you heard it from someone else." I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work, but it was impossible. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was David. Instead, it was friends and family members who'd seen Claire's post and wanted to know what was going on. My friend Jules called during my lunch break. "Irene, what the hell is happening? Claire is posting cryptic messages about family loyalty, and David isn't answering his phone." Jules and I had been friends since college. She was one of the few people who knew about my history with Adrian, though I'd never told her about our recent reconnection. David and I are having some problems, I said carefully. What kind of problems? This sounds serious. I wanted to tell her everything, to have someone on my side, but something in her tone made me hesitate. Jules was happily married to her college sweetheart, the kind of person who believed in working through problems rather than running from them. I made a mistake, I said finally. A big one. What kind of mistake, Irene? I saw Adrian last weekend. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Please tell me you mean you ran into him somewhere, Jules said finally. I wish I could. Oh, Irene. Oh no. What were you thinking? I wasn't thinking. I was feeling trapped and invisible and... So you cheated on your husband. The blunt statement made me flinch. It wasn't supposed to happen. It was just supposed to be coffee, just catching up. But it wasn't just coffee. No. And David found out. Adrian sent a text while David was sitting right there. The message showed up on my lock screen. Jules let out a long breath. How bad was the message? I told her what Adrian had written, and I could practically hear her wincing through the phone. Irene, that's not just evidence of cheating. That's evidence of an ongoing relationship. It sounds like you were planning to see him again. I wasn't. I don't know. I was confused. Are you still confused? The question caught me off guard. Was I still confused? Part of me missed Adrian already, missed the way he'd looked at me like I was something precious and rare. But I also missed David, missed the stability and security of our life together. I want to save my marriage, I said. Then you need to cut all contact with Adrian and figure out how to earn back David's trust. And Irene, you need to be prepared for the possibility that he might not forgive you. After work, I drove to David's parents' house, hoping to see Jonas and maybe convince David to come home so we could talk. But when I knocked on the door, it was David's mother, Sophia, who answered, and her expression was colder than I'd ever seen it. Irene. Her voice was flat, unwelcoming. Hi, Sophia. I was hoping to see Jonas and David. Jonas is doing homework. David is at work. Could I wait for him? Or maybe just see Jonas for a few minutes? Sophia studied me for a long moment. I think it's best if you give them some space right now. He's my son, Sophia. I have a right to see him. And you had a responsibility to your family that you chose to ignore. The accusation hung between us. Sophia had always been polite to me, if not warm. We'd never been close, but we'd maintained a cordial relationship for David's sake. Now I could see exactly what she thought of me. I made a mistake, I said. I'm trying to fix it. Some mistakes can't be fixed, Irene. Some choices have consequences that can't be undone. She started to close the door, but I put my hand out to stop her. Please, just let me see my son. Your son is fine. He's safe and loved and protected. Maybe you should have thought about him before you decided to have your little adventure. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me standing on the porch, feeling like I'd been slapped. I drove home through the November darkness, past houses lit up with warm yellow light, past families having dinner together, and children doing homework at kitchen tables. Everything I'd taken for granted just a week ago now seemed impossibly precious and far away. At home, I found an envelope that had been slipped under my front door. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a printout of David's calendar, showing a meeting scheduled for Friday afternoon with someone named Patricia Chen, Esquez, a divorce lawyer. The paper shook in my hands as I read it. David was already talking to lawyers, already planning for the end of our marriage. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just anger that would blow over. This wasn't just hurt feelings that time would heal. David was done. I called him immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried texting. Please don't do this. We can work through this. I love you. No response. I called his office, but his secretary said he was in meetings all day and couldn't be disturbed. That night, I lay in the guest bed again, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how everything had fallen apart so quickly. A week ago, I'd been planning a secret weekend that would make me feel alive again. Now, I was facing the possibility of losing everything that mattered. I thought about calling Adrian, just to have someone to talk to who might understand, but I knew that would only make things worse. Whatever was left of my marriage would be completely destroyed if David found out I was still in contact with Adrian. Instead, I called my mother again. "I think David is going to divorce me," I said without preamble when she answered. "What makes you think that?" I told her about the lawyer's appointment, about Sophia's coldness, about the social media posts, and the way everyone was treating me like I had some kind of contagious disease. "Maybe this is for the best," my mother said quietly. "What? Mom, how can you say that?" "Because maybe David deserves better than someone who lies to him and cheats on him and then expects him to just forgive and forget." The words hit me like a slap. "I thought you were supposed to be supportive." "I am being supportive. I'm telling you the truth instead of enabling your self-pity." "Self-pity? I'm trying to save my marriage." "No, you're trying to avoid the consequences of your choices. There's a difference." After I hung up, I sat in the kitchen looking at the drawing Jonas had made of our family. 3 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. Mommy, Daddy, and Jonas. Such a simple picture of happiness, and I'd destroyed it for a weekend of feeling desired. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming, could hear the neighbor's cat yowling in the backyard. I'd never realized how much noise David and Jonas made just by being here, how much life they brought to these rooms. Now it was just me, and the silence, and the growing certainty that I'd lost everything that mattered for something that had never been real in the first place. My phone buzzed with a text message, and for a moment my heart leaped, thinking it might be David. Instead, it was Adrian. "Saw your husband's sister's Facebook post. You okay?" I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. Whatever happened next, Adrian couldn't be part of it. That door had to stay closed, no matter how much I missed the way he'd made me feel. But as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to another night alone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd closed the wrong door, made the wrong choice, and now it was too late to fix anything at all. Friday morning brought rain, and the kind of grey Seattle sky that made everything feel hopeless. I'd barely slept, kept awake by thoughts of David sitting in a lawyer's office, discussing custody arrangements and asset division, like our 8 years of marriage were just a business transaction to be dissolved. I called in sick to work. I couldn't face another day of whispered conversations and pitying looks. Instead, I drove to David's office building and waited in the parking lot like some kind of stalker, hoping to catch him before his appointment with the divorce lawyer. At 11:30, I saw his silver sedan pull into the parking lot. David got out, looking tired and older than his 36 years. He was wearing the navy suit I'd bought him for his birthday 2 years ago, the one that brought out his eyes. The irony of him wearing my gift to meet with the divorce lawyer wasn't lost on me. "David," I called out, hurrying across the parking lot. He stopped, his shoulders tensing when he saw me. "Irene, what are you doing here?" "I know about your appointment today. Please don't do this. Don't throw away our marriage without even trying to work through this." "Work through this?" His voice was quiet, but I could hear the anger underneath. "You mean work through the fact that you lied to me for months? Work through the fact that you created an elaborate story to cover up cheating on me? Work through the fact that you came home and looked me in the eye and told me more lies? It was one weekend, David. One mistake. It wasn't one weekend. It was 6 months of emotional cheating. 6 months of sharing yourself with another man while pretending to be a faithful wife." People were starting to stare as they walked past us toward the office building. David noticed too and grabbed my arm, pulling me toward his car. "Get in," he said. "We're not doing this in public." We sat in his car with the rain drumming on the roof, and for a moment it felt almost normal, like we were just a married couple having a conversation. But then David turned to look at me, and I saw the distance in his eyes, the careful way he was holding himself apart from me. I read all the messages, he said, all of them, the ones you thought you deleted too. My stomach dropped. How? They're backed up to the cloud, Irene. Did you really think deleting them from your phone would make them disappear? I felt sick. Those messages contained everything. The gradual escalation from friendly conversation to flirtation to explicit planning for our weekend together. David had seen it all. The worst part, David continued, wasn't even the sexual stuff. It was reading how you complained about me to him, how you told him I was boring and predictable, and that you felt trapped in our marriage. David, I didn't mean... You told him I never surprised you anymore. You told him our sex life was routine. You told him you missed feeling passionate about someone. Each accusation was like a knife twist. I had said those things, in moments of frustration and self-pity, but seeing them reflected back at me through David's pain made me realize how cruel they'd been. I was venting, I said weakly. Everyone complains about their spouse sometimes. To their friends, maybe, not to their ex-boyfriend who they're planning to cheat with. I wasn't planning to cheat, it just happened. David laughed, but there was no humor in it. It just happened. You booked train tickets. You created a fake conference. You packed specific clothes. You researched Portland so you could answer my questions. That's not something that just happened, Irene. That's premeditation. I wanted to argue, but he was right. I had planned every detail, had crafted the lie carefully and deliberately. There was no way to frame it as a spontaneous mistake. I'm sorry, I said. I'm so sorry. I know I hurt you, and I know I broke your trust. But we can rebuild it. We can go to counseling. We can work through this together. How? David asked. How do I ever trust you again? How do I believe anything you say when you've proven you're willing to lie about anything to get what you want? Because I love you. Because I choose you. You chose him. For 6 months you chose him every time you sent a message complaining about me. You chose him when you planned that weekend. You chose him when you got in your car and drove to Seattle instead of Portland. But I'm choosing you now, only because you got caught. If that message hadn't come through while I was sitting there, you'd still be lying to me. You'd probably be planning your next weekend with him. The accusation stung because part of it was true. I had been thinking about seeing Adrian again, had felt a thrill at the possibility of more stolen weekends. That's not true, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Be honest with me, Irene. For once in the last 6 months, be completely honest. If you hadn't been caught, would you have seen him again? I wanted to lie, to give David the answer that might save our marriage, but something in his eyes told me he'd know if I wasn't telling the truth. I don't know, I whispered. David nodded like I'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. That's what I thought. But I ended it, I said desperately. As soon as you found out, I told Adrian it was over. I haven't talked to him since. You ended it because you got caught, not because you realized it was wrong. I knew it was wrong the whole time. I felt guilty every day. But you did it anyway. Yes. And you plan to keep doing it. I don't know. Maybe. I was confused. Are you still confused? The same question Jules had asked me, and I still didn't have a clear answer. Did I miss Adrian? Yes. Did I regret the weekend? I regretted getting caught, regretted hurting David, but the weekend itself... I miss feeling alive, I said finally. I miss feeling desired and interesting, and like I was more than just someone's wife and mother. So our marriage made you feel dead. Not dead, just invisible. Like I was going through the motions of a life instead of actually living one. David was quiet for a long time, staring out at the rain. When he finally spoke, his voice was very soft. I felt invisible too, he said. I felt like you were going through the motions with me, like you were just tolerating our life together instead of choosing it. But I didn't go find someone else to make me feel important. I thought about talking to you about it. I thought about counseling. I thought about planning a romantic weekend, just the two of us. The words hit me like a physical blow. Why didn't you? Because I was afraid you'd say no. Because I was afraid you'd confirm what I was already starting to suspect, that you didn't want to be married to me anymore. That's not true. Isn't it? You spent 6 months building a relationship with another man. You told him things about our marriage that you never told me. You shared your feelings with him instead of with your husband. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. Everything David was saying was true. So, what now? I asked. You just give up. You don't even try to save our marriage. I tried to save our marriage for 6 months while you were destroying it. I tried to be a better husband while you were planning to cheat on me. I tried to connect with you while you were connecting with him. I didn't know you were trying, because you weren't paying attention. You were too busy with Adrian to notice that your husband was struggling too. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the car roof like accusations. David started the engine, and I realized our conversation was over. Where does this leave us? I asked. I don't know, David said. I have an appointment to keep. We'll talk more later. When? When I'm ready. I got out of the car and watched him drive away toward his appointment with the divorce lawyer. Standing in the parking lot in the rain, I felt the full weight of what I'd done, what I'd lost, what I might never be able to get back. My phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. Miss you. When can we talk? I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. But for the first time, I wondered if I was deleting it because I wanted to save my marriage, or because I was afraid of what David might do if he found out Adrian was still trying to contact me. And that uncertainty, I was beginning to realize, might be the real reason my marriage was over. The weekend stretched ahead of me like a prison sentence. David wasn't returning my calls. Jonas was still staying with his grandparents, and I was alone in a house that felt like a mausoleum of my former life. I spent Saturday morning cleaning obsessively, as if scrubbing the baseboards could somehow scrub away what I'd done. Sunday afternoon, Jules finally came over. I'd been calling her since Friday, desperate to talk to someone who might understand, someone who might help me figure out how to fix this. You look terrible, she said when I opened the door. Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Jules followed me into the kitchen, where I'd been stress-baking cookies I had no intention of eating. Have you heard from David? Nothing. It's like I don't exist. Maybe that's for the best right now. Maybe he needs time to process. Or maybe he's already made up his mind, and I'm just too stupid to accept it. Jules sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where David and I had eaten breakfast every morning for 8 years, where Jonas did his homework, where we'd planned family vacations and discussed household budgets and lived the ordinary life I'd thrown away. Tell me about Adrian, Jules said. What about him? What made you risk everything for him? Help me understand, because right now I'm having trouble seeing how a weekend with your college boyfriend was worth destroying your marriage. I poured coffee into 2 mugs, buying time while I tried to figure out how to explain it. Do you remember what it was like when you first fell in love with Tom? That feeling like you were the most fascinating person in the world? Of course. I haven't felt that way in years. With David, I'm just functional. I'm the woman who remembers to buy milk and schedules oil changes and makes sure Jonas has clean clothes for school. I'm useful, but I'm not desired. So you went looking for someone who would desire you. I wasn't looking. Adrian found me on LinkedIn. It started innocently. But it didn't stay innocent. No. I sat down across from Jules, wrapping my hands around my coffee mug for warmth. He made me feel like the woman I used to be, spontaneous and passionate and interesting. You are interesting, Irene. You're smart and successful and a good mother. But I'm not exciting. I'm not the kind of woman men write poetry about or plan romantic getaways for. Is that what Adrian did? Wrote you poetry? I felt heat rise in my cheeks. He wrote me messages that made me feel beautiful. He planned our weekend like it was the most important thing in the world. And David never did anything like that. David plans things like retirement accounts and college savings funds. Practical things. Jules was quiet for a moment, studying my face. Do you love Adrian? The question caught me off guard. I don't know. I love how he makes me feel. That's not the same thing. I know that. Do you love David? Yes, of course I do. But you love how Adrian makes you feel more than you love David. That's not fair. It's not that simple. Isn't it? Jules leaned forward. You chose to risk your marriage for a weekend with Adrian. That's a choice that says something about your priorities. I made a mistake. I was confused and lonely, and I made a terrible decision. Are you still confused? The same question everyone kept asking, and I still didn't have a clear answer. Was I confused? Or was I just sorry I'd been caught? I want to save my marriage, I said. That's not what I asked. Before I could answer, my phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen, and I grabbed it so quickly I nearly dropped it. David, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the house in an hour? I'm at the house. I live here. I'll be there in an hour. The line went dead. I looked at Jules, who had clearly heard both sides of the conversation. He's coming here, I said. That's good. Maybe you can work things out. But something in David's tone made me think this wasn't going to be a reconciliation conversation. Jules left before David arrived, squeezing my hand and telling me to be honest, to really listen to what he was saying. I spent the hour pacing the house, rehearsing what I wanted to say, how I could convince him to give our marriage another chance. When David's car pulled into the driveway, I watched from the window as he sat there for a moment before getting out. He looked exhausted, older than he had just a few days ago. This was destroying him too, and that realization made me feel even worse. He let himself in with his key, but somehow his presence felt formal, like a visitor rather than someone who lived here. How was your weekend? I asked, immediately regretting the casual tone. Fine. David sat down in the living room, but not on the couch where we usually sat together. Instead, he chose the armchair, creating physical distance between us. Did you see Jonas? Yes, he's doing okay. He's worried about you. I miss him. I miss both of you. David nodded but didn't respond to the sentiment. Instead, he pulled out a folder and set it on the coffee table. I met with a lawyer on Friday, he said. David, please, let me finish. I need to say this, and I need you to listen. I nodded, my heart hammering. I've been thinking about what you said, about feeling invisible in our marriage. And you're right. We had problems. We'd grown apart, stopped really seeing each other. Hope flared in my chest. We can fix that. We can go to counseling. We can work on reconnecting. I thought about that too. I thought about whether I could forgive you, whether we could rebuild trust. And? David was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. I keep coming back to the same question. If you felt invisible in our marriage, why didn't you talk to me about it? Why didn't you suggest counseling or a romantic weekend, or even just an honest conversation about what we both needed? I don't know. I guess I didn't think you'd understand. So instead of trying to fix our marriage, you started an emotional affair with your ex-boyfriend. It wasn't supposed to become an affair. It just evolved. Over 6 months. It evolved over 6 months of daily conversations where you complained about me and flirted with him and planned a future that didn't include your husband. I wanted to argue, but everything he was saying was true. The thing is, David continued, I could maybe forgive the cheating. People make mistakes. People get lonely. People do stupid things. But I can't forgive the lying. I can't forgive the elaborate deception, the fake conference, the way you looked me in the eye and told me lies for months. I was protecting you. I was protecting our marriage. You were protecting yourself, and you were planning to keep protecting yourself by continuing the affair. That's not true, isn't it? Be honest, Irene. If that text hadn't come through while I was sitting there, what would have happened? Would you have ended it with Adrian? I opened my mouth to say yes, but the word wouldn't come, because the truth was, I'd been planning to see Adrian again. I'd been thinking about how to arrange another weekend, another escape from my ordinary life. I don't know, I whispered. I know, and that's why I can't do this anymore. David opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. These are divorce papers. I'm filing for dissolution of marriage on grounds of irreconcilable differences. The words hit me like a physical blow. David, no, please, we can work through this. We can't, because I'll never trust you again, and you'll never be happy with the kind of man I am. That's not true. I love you. You love the security I provide. You love the life we built together. But you don't love me, Irene. If you loved me, you wouldn't have spent 6 months building a relationship with another man. Tears were streaming down my face now. Please don't do this. Think about Jonas. Think about our family. I am thinking about Jonas. I'm thinking about what it would do to him to grow up in a house where his parents don't trust each other, where his mother is always looking for something more exciting than his father can provide. I'll change. I'll be different. I don't want you to change. I want you to be happy. And you're not happy with me, Irene. You haven't been happy with me for a long time. The truth of that statement was like a knife to the heart. I hadn't been happy. Not really. I'd been content, comfortable, secure, but not happy. What about custody? I asked through my tears. Shared custody. Jonas will spend weekdays with me during the school year, weekends and holidays with you. We'll alternate vacations. You're taking my son away from me. I'm providing stability for our son, while you figure out what you really want from life. David stood up, leaving the papers on the coffee table. You have 30 days to respond. My lawyer will be in touch with the details. Where are you going? I'm staying at my parents' house until we can work out the living arrangements. The house will probably need to be sold as part of the settlement. The house. Our home. The place where we'd brought Jonas home from the hospital, where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, where we'd built a life together. All of it would be gone. David, please, don't leave like this. Stay and talk to me. There's nothing left to talk about, Irene. You made your choice 6 months ago. I'm just finally accepting it. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, he said, I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope Adrian makes you as happy as you thought he would. I don't want Adrian. I want you. No, you don't. You want the security I provide and the excitement he provides. You want everything without having to choose. But that's not how life works. The door closed behind him with the same quiet click as before, but this time I knew he wasn't coming back. I sat on the couch staring at the divorce papers through my tears and realized that in trying to have everything, I'd lost the only things that really mattered. My phone buzzed with another message from Adrian. Thinking about you. Hope things work out. This time, I didn't delete the message. Instead, I stared at it for a long time, wondering if David was right, if I'd thrown away my marriage for a man who sent casual texts about hoping things worked out. The house felt emptier than ever, filled with the ghosts of the life I'd destroyed and the uncertain future I'd chosen without meaning to choose it. 3 weeks after David served me with divorce papers, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, trying to understand how my life had become a legal document filled with terms like irreconcilable differences and equitable distribution. My attorney, Margaret Walsh, was explaining the settlement offer in her calm, professional voice, but the words seemed to float past me like they belonged to someone else's life. Your husband is being quite generous, Margaret said, sliding papers across her desk. He's offering you 40% of the house's equity, half of the savings accounts, and your full retirement fund. The custody arrangement is also fair. Shared custody with Jonas, spending school weeks with his father and weekends with you. Generous, I repeated. The word felt strange in my mouth. David was being generous with the life we'd built together, parceling it out like items at an estate sale. There is one unusual clause, Margaret continued. Your husband is requesting reimbursement for what he calls marital deception expenses. What does that mean? The money you spent on your weekend trip, train tickets, hotel, meals, shopping. He has receipts for everything. I felt sick. David had tracked down every expense from my weekend with Adrian, had calculated the exact cost of my betrayal down to the dollar. He's also requesting that any future communication between you and Jonas be conducted through a co-parenting app. No private calls or texts unless it's an emergency. He's cutting me off from my own son. He's creating boundaries to protect the child from potential conflict. It's actually quite common in contentious divorces. Contentious. Was that what this was? I'd been thinking of it as a mistake that had spiraled out of control, but David was treating it like a war. How long do I have to respond? 1 week. But Irene, I have to advise you to accept this offer. If we go to trial, the judge might not be as sympathetic, especially given the circumstances of the marriage breakdown. The circumstances. My lawyer's polite way of saying I'd cheated on my husband and lied about it for months. I signed the papers with a hand that shook so badly I could barely hold the pen. Outside the lawyer's office, Seattle looked different than it had a month ago. The city where I'd lived for 8 years now felt foreign, like I was seeing it through someone else's eyes. My phone rang as I sat in my car in the parking lot. Adrian's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time in weeks, I answered. Irene, I've been worried about you. You haven't been returning my messages. I've been dealing with the divorce. I'm sorry, I know this must be hard. Is it? I asked. Is it hard, Adrian? Because I'm not sure I know the difference between hard and impossible anymore. Do you want to talk about it? I could drive down there, or you could come up here for the weekend. The casual offer made something snap inside me. Come up there for the weekend, like nothing has changed, like I haven't just lost my husband and my son and my house. I didn't mean... What did you mean? What exactly did you think would happen when you sent me that text while my husband was sitting right there? I didn't know he was there. You never told me he was suspicious. I never told you a lot of things, Adrian. Like how guilty I felt every day. Like how I was planning to end things with you after that weekend. Like how I never actually wanted to leave my marriage, just escape from it for a little while. There was silence on the other end of the line. Are you saying you regret what happened between us? Adrian asked finally. I'm saying I regret everything. I regret messaging you back in the first place. I regret complaining about my husband to you. I regret that weekend, and I regret answering this phone call. Irene, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months. You want to know what I figured out? You didn't make me feel alive, Adrian. You made me feel like someone else. Someone selfish and dishonest and willing to destroy her family for a weekend of feeling special. That's not fair. You came to me because you were unhappy. You chose to spend that weekend with me. You're right, I did choose it, and now I'm choosing to end this conversation and never speak to you again. I hung up before he could respond and sat in my car, shaking. For months, I'd been telling myself that what Adrian and I had was special, that it was worth the risk, that it filled some essential need in my life. But talking to him now, hearing his casual assumption that we could just pick up where we left off, I realized how hollow it had all been. David had been right. I'd thrown away something real for something that was essentially fantasy. That evening, I called my mother to tell her about the settlement. 40% seems fair, she said after I'd explained the terms. Fair? Mum, he's taking my son away from me. He's sharing custody of your son. There's a difference. Whose side are you on? I'm on the side of reality, Irene. You cheated on your husband. You lied to him for months. You planned an elaborate deception to spend a weekend with another man. What did you expect would happen? I expected my family to support me. We are supporting you. We're telling you the truth, instead of enabling your victim mentality. Victim mentality? Yes. You keep talking about what David is taking away from you, but you never talk about what you took away from him. You took away his trust, his security, his belief in his marriage. You took away his ability to feel safe in his own home. The accusation hit me like a slap. I never thought about it that way. That's the problem. You never thought about how your choices would affect anyone but yourself. After I hung up, I walked through the house that would soon be sold, looking at the life David and I had built together. The kitchen where we'd cooked meals and had late-night conversations. The living room where we'd watched movies and argued about the thermostat and celebrated Jonas's first steps. The bedroom where we'd made love and made plans and made a child together. All of it would be gone soon, divided up and distributed like the assets in a bankruptcy. My phone buzzed with a notification from the co-parenting app David had insisted we use. A message from him. Jonas has a soccer game Saturday at 10 a.m. You're welcome to attend if you'd like. The formal tone of the message broke my heart. This was what we'd become. Co-parents communicating through an app. Former spouses who needed technology to mediate their interactions. I typed back, "I'll be there. Thank you for letting me know." His response came immediately. "Of course, he's your son too." Your son too, not our son, not the child we'd raised together for 10 years. Your son too, like I was a secondary parent, someone who needed to be granted permission to be involved in Jonas's life. Saturday morning, I arrived at the soccer field early, hoping to talk to Jonas before the game started. But when I saw him warming up with his team, David was there too, along with his parents and his sister Claire. They looked like a family unit, complete and intact, while I stood on the opposite side of the field like an outsider. Jonas spotted me and waved, his face lighting up with a smile that made my chest ache. He ran over, still in his soccer cleats and grass-stained uniform. "Mum, I didn't know you were coming." "I wouldn't miss your game, sweetheart." "Dad said you guys are getting divorced." The matter-of-fact way he said it made me realize David had been honest with him, had explained the situation in age-appropriate terms instead of making me the villain. "Yes, we are. But that doesn't change how much we both love you." "I know. Dad explained it. He said sometimes grown-ups can't figure out how to be married anymore, but they never stop being parents." David's words, delivered with the same careful honesty he brought to everything else. Even in divorce, he was being the better person. "Are you okay, Mum? You look sad." "I am sad, baby, but I'm also grateful that I get to be your mom, no matter what." Jonas hugged me, fierce and quick, then ran back to his team. I watched him play, cheering from my side of the field while David cheered from his, and realized this was what co-parenting would look like. Parallel lives that intersected only at soccer games and school events and carefully scheduled handoffs. After the game, which Jonas's team won 3-2, David walked over to where I was standing. "He played well," I said. "He's been working on his footwork. Coach says he has real potential." We stood there awkwardly, two people who used to share everything now reduced to small talk about our son's athletic abilities. "The realtor wants to list the house next week," David said finally. "Okay. You'll need to pack up your things. I can help if you want." "That's okay. I can manage." David nodded, then looked like he wanted to say something else. For a moment, I hoped he might say he'd changed his mind, that he wanted to try again, that love could overcome betrayal if we both worked hard enough. Instead, he said, "I hope you find what you're looking for, Irene. I really do." "I found it," I said quietly. "I just didn't realize it until I'd thrown it away." David's expression softened slightly. "Take care of yourself." He walked away toward his family, toward Jonas, toward the life that would continue without me as its center. I stood in the parking lot watching them load into David's car, watching my son wave goodbye through the back window, and realized that this was my new reality. 6 months later, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment across town, working the same job but coming home to silence instead of family dinner conversations. Jonas spent weekends with me, and we were building a new kind of relationship, more intentional, less taken for granted. David and I communicated through the app, polite and efficient and completely professional. I never heard from Adrian again after that phone call in the lawyer's parking lot. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I'd never answered his LinkedIn message, if I'd talked to David about my feelings of invisibility instead of seeking validation from someone else. But mostly, I tried not to think about what-ifs. Instead, I focused on building a life that was smaller but more honest, lonelier but more authentic. I'd learned the hard way that some choices can't be undone, some trust can't be rebuilt, and some receipts can't be deleted. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in March, 8 months after that text message had appeared on my phone screen. I signed the papers in Margaret's office, officially ending 8 years of marriage with the stroke of a pen. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt empty, but also oddly relieved. The pretending was over. The lies were finished. Whatever came next, it would be built on truth, even if that truth was harder to live with than the fantasy I'd created. My phone buzzed with a message from Jonas. "Love you, Mum. See you Friday." I smiled for the first time in months. I'd lost my husband and my house and the life I'd taken for granted. But I was still his mother, and that was something no divorce decree could take away. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was the life I'd chosen through a series of small betrayals and large lies. And maybe, eventually, it would be enough.